Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about the classical world, classical education, old things, books, and all those fun stuff from the ancient world. This is Classical Stuff. Spring Break Edition!
So that explains why you're in your swimming trunks.
It's true. Yep,
naturally.
So you can listen, you spring breakers, listen to this on maybe you are on a beautiful trip to the Italian Riviera. Or you decided to go to the Far East and check out the wonders of South Korea or inland China. Or perhaps maybe you are more of a California girl.
Oh, no.
And you've gone off to the West Coast. No, this is Spring Break Edition, staying home, doing nothing, stuck in the house. And Thomas, this also explains why you are in a giant plastic bubble.
Yes, exactly. I'm wearing my hazmat suit today.
Yes.
So I'm glad. I hope the audio quality is okay.
Oh, that's
from
by
inside
hazmat.
Here. Yeah.
I was unfamiliar with the designer.
It's the designer. Yeah.
It's the hazmat fall,
Hazmati spring line.
fall collection. No, this is, my name is Graham Donaldson, and I am joined with AJ Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Thomas Magby.
Hi.
And we are teachers and educators, I guess that's a redundancy, at a school in Austin, Texas called Veritas Academy. And we're on spring break as teachers, and we don't know when we're coming back. We don't know what the whole situation is. It's kind of a squirrely world out there.
Nothing's been canceled for us.
Oh, that's true. No, fair point. Nothing has been canceled in Austin yet.
Our leaders are wisely deciding whether or not to bring us back. I mean, there's a couple
Our students
of schools that
are convinced that the school is done.
Well, they want a break.
At the end of school, they're like, I'll see you next year, 2020.
The seniors were like, happy last day of school.
Yeah.
Wasn't it UT gave a second week of spring break? I think that's what everyone's hoping for. So I guess
It's week 2. Yeah.
I'll admit, I am also hoping for another week of spring break.
You know what? It's the height of prudence.
To
think so.
Yeah, I mean,
it's only wisdom.
Yeah.
To have more vacation.
And while we are in our what is the term now? Social distancing.
Yeah.
We Americans need to come together and stay away from each other.
Okay.
And so while we are in our social distancing, one could say that we are stuck, maybe in limbo or in some sort of in-between place.
It's different.
Like Ohio?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, we're going to be talking about the great Midwest of the afterlife. Purgatory.
Didn't we rag on Ohio last time?
So messed up.
We're sorry, Ohio.
We love you.
I've never been to Ohio. I have no frame of reference for Ohio. But we are going to be talking...
I saw the play once, and I think...
That's Oklahoma.
You mean Oklahoma? Yeah. You
They're
definitely...
different states?
Yeah, different states.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I think I left in the middle of that play because I didn't realize that the intermission was not actually the end of the play. And I was like, man, they really left that on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
That's a weird way to end a play. And then I just went home and realized that it went on for another hour.
Anyway, we are going to be talking about
Hot take on the musical Oklahoma. You didn't miss very much. Sorry.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, anyway.
From what I remember, it's been a long time. I feel like the musical ends with like a lynching, not a lynching, but like a mob rule sort of justice, vigilante justice.
Yeah. Isn't there?
They all just decided the guy in the town is a jerk.
It ends in tyranny?
Wait, we should talk about it for Plato.
Democracy ripe for tyranny.
There you go.
Cool.
Probably closer to democracy.
Anyway, Thomas, you were going to be talking. You're holding a book that says "The Beginner Guide to Purgatory." No,
it says Dante. Then
Dante.
If you, I got 2 books, so we also have Dante's Purgatory on this side. So
I'm stoked.
The classical stuff version of two-fisting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and I'm glad, listener, you get to hear a visual description of the books I'm holding. So sorry about that. We're going to be talking about Purgatory today. So I guess we'll dive in. Graham just referenced this. There are 2 books that I'll be pulling from. One, obviously, is Dante's Purgatory, because we'll be cruising through that. We're not going to make it through all of Purgatory today. We're going to make it basically to the bottom of the mountain, and that will make sense.
That's like right at the beginning.
It's like 9 canti, and canti plural. So we'll get through, what's that, about a third of the book. So
cool.
That is worthwhile.
Isn't Cato at the bottom of the mountain?
That is actually one of our first talking points, so good for you. Anthony Esselin is the translator of this work. I did not read the original Italian for this one, but my wife said I should. She studied abroad in Italy, so I bet she could definitely do that. This is from the back of the book. Anthony Esselin is a professor of English at Providence College. He's the author of a bunch of very good books. He's
not at Providence anymore, I don't think.
Whenever he put this one out, he did. But he also has translations of the Inferno and Paradiso. I've read his Inferno translation, and I like it, but I've not read as many Inferno translations as AJ, so it might be trash, and I just don't know it.
Yeah, Berg, what translation do you guys do in 9th grade?
The Mark Musa?
Yeah, so not Esselin. Have you read?
It's really simple.
Anthony Esselin's is, or
the one we use.
Okay.
We try to choose translations that are accessible to ninth grade minds.
User-friendly, friendly to the most ninth graders.
So we don't necessarily aim for the highest poeticism. We aim for something that we can access.
And for what it's worth, Anthony Esselin is a writer, social commentator, translator of classical poetry, and writer in residence at Magdalene College of the Liberal Arts. He taught at Furman College and Providence College before transferring to the Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in 2017. So he has recently moved.
There's an interesting story about why he did that.
Why is that?
So at Providence, he was sort of. Now I'm reading this. He can sort of speak for himself, but I was reading this sort of
Mr. Esselin,
secondhand.
if you'd like to speak for yourself.
Yes, please come on the podcast.
Please come on Classical
But
Stuff.
he was sort of disturbed over the sort of growing liberalism in the Catholic Church, at least at Providence, and sort of the lack of piety among the student body, and the school kind of losing its I don't know how you want to describe it, its identity as a Catholic institution, and just was being awash in sort of liberal modernity, like every once religious institution has been, or is, at least according to him. And so he sort of was going, but, Providence is a big school, and it's where you go and you get tenure, or you're going to have a great career, and you just kind of like have to swallow the bad with the good. But then he went to this small little college, what is it, Thomas More at...
Yeah, that's the...
and when he was there, he was just struck by the student body they knew they were at a small college. They didn't have these big delusions of grandeur or feel like they were on this big sort of, quest of power through education or whatever. And he just sort of was struck by the sort of the simple piety of the student body, and everybody seemed to be pulling in the same direction for a holy life. Yep. And he's like, I'm quitting Providence. And it was this big deal because he's a big name, and that's a big school, and that's essentially like leaving the top of your field for something, and everyone's like, oh, what are you running away from? Are you scared of, sort of the liberal world? And he said, no, I'm not running away from anything. I'm running to something.
That's cool.
I'm running to this institution that wants to do education rightly, at least in his view of it. So, I mean, I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for that kind of decision-making process. But anyway, That's what I know of Anthony Esselin.
Yeah, we as a part of Veritas Academy, there's one of our class trips is for the sophomores to go and look at colleges, and I think I didn't go on this year's trip, but I've been on the 3 that came before that. Anyway, I had a similar experience visiting the University of Dallas, I think is the name of it, mm-hmm. a Catholic liberal arts school in Dallas, obviously. And, maybe they were just showing us the best people that they had, but it just seemed like a place of like that took faith seriously. But also not just like an emotional experience of faith, but an intellectual experience of it. Yeah. It was just a great place to go and visit. And we had a few students who like saw that and immediately wanted that.
Cool.
It was just really exciting.
That's good. I mean, there are still good places out there. They're just, you got to take it. You take a hit, because these places don't have these big names. And anyway. Yep. Where should the young Christian seminarian go to seminary is an interesting question these days.
Apparently, Thomas More Liberal Arts College, whatever the name of the place is.
Anyway, sorry, Thomas.
No, you're good. This is non sequitur, and just because Graham was saying all that, he, in addition to his translation work, he has written a number of books. Among them, just a charmingly named book that's been on my to-read list for a long time: 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child, which I would anyway very much like to read. Do you like that? Yeah. I don't think he actually wants to destroy the...
I have so many jokes, but all of them are violent and terrible.
Wow.
So I'll keep them.
That's terrifying. You're coming up with your own 10 ways to destroy the imagination of your children? Great. Mm-hmm. Good. Look for the Classical Stuff parenting book out in bookstores.
That is a great idea.
That is a horrible
I'll work on it.
Okay, great.
I think collectively we have one child.
Yes, out of the 3 of us.
I don't feel comfortable saying that collectively we have any children. I don't like that.
Don't be selfish, Thomas.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry. Okay, so
it takes a village.
I guess that is a technically true statement. Okay, so Anthony Esselin's translation is the one that I'm using. It is one that comes recommended. I have not read other translations, so it could be bad, but I like it and I find it accessible. And in particular, AJ, I went back and listened to the episode we did almost exactly a year ago at this point on the Inferno. You talk about the footnotes being very helpful in the version of the Inferno that you use.
Yeah.
But what I don't remember, in the version you use, are they at the bottom of each page or is it end of each canto?
They are endnotes at the end of each canto.
Okay. So this is so minor and in the weeds, but Esselin puts like important footnotes at the bottom of each page, and then there's it's got to be a third of the book is notes at the end of the Purgatorio. So if you really want to go deep on something, which will follow one of those footnotes today, I mean, it's all there. It's really well researched. I found it very helpful.
Interesting.
So just as something I've enjoyed. Okay, so that is on the Purgatorio side. On the other book side that Graham was referencing, this is A Beginner's Guide to Dante's Divine Comedy. This is a book by Dr. Jason Baxter. And just because I just got called out for getting my first reference wrong, I pulled it up and confirmed that this is actually true. Jason Baxter is an associate professor of fine arts and humanities at Wyoming Catholic College. He has been there for 9 years, and he, anyway, still has a bio and page up there now. So in this book, he walks through all three parts of the Divine Comedy. For people tuning in, first off, you should probably listen to AJ's episode first on the Inferno, which is again an episode. If you search Dante, you'll find it in the podcast feed. I think it's still in the feed. It hasn't rolled off yet. But the Divine Comedy is made up of three different parts. It starts with the Inferno, moves into the Purgatorio, which is what we're going to cover today, and then ends with the Paradiso, which I've never read, and I think we all said we found boring when we tried to read it.
But I found it boring when I tried to read it, but I think I was 21, 22
Fair.
The last time I did it.
Right. Yeah, I think now I would find it a little more interesting.
I just remember it being a giant flower. Like, it's just like a giant flower.
Yeah, and that's, I was talking with students about, they don't read Great Expectations anymore, but I remember in high school hating that book and then loving it when I came back to it at 26 or 27. But that was it just spoke to a thing I was going through at that time, and so it was just much more helpful then. So I don't know if, same with Paradiso, like, was I just not holy enough the first time I tried to read it? And anyway, should I have read the Purgatorio first, which probably would make sense. So I find this book helpful. Yes, Esalen provides a number of footnotes, and it is fine to just dive into the book itself. I find it helpful in having some kind of guide to take me through the Divine Comedy, which is somewhat ironic because, anyway, Dante also has a guide through his entire time there. So anyway, okay, so this book has been helpful for me. I would implore it to you if you are interested in going through all three parts of the Divine Comedy. Okay, so we will get into the Purgatorio, I guess, actually in a second. Okay, so when we talked about the Inferno a year ago, there was not much in the way of disagreement about there being, or at least there being some classical conception of hell, or a bad place you go if you do bad things, or like things don't go great for you in life. That hell was like accepted as a category that we had. Just because we're three Protestants talking about this, does anyone want to make any comments on purgatory as a place in the afterlife?
Man, I mean, I could be convinced of it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, I could be. I know.
What a way to start. Okay.
I could be convinced of.
You're ceding ground immediately.
You converting?
Yes,
no.
Exactly.
When's your confirmation?
It's that. Now, whether or not it's like you got to do this before you can get into heaven, I don't know about that. But I've always had a bit of a problem with kind of like, as when you die, you're instantly perfect. The kind of conception, the way that sometimes you talk about it. So like you have sin and you struggle with sin in your life.
Why do I have to wait till I die?
Yeah.
AJ's there now. What are you talking about?
So the way that it was sort of, at least, maybe if it wasn't believed, it was at least inferred when I was just sort of in Protestant Christian culture growing up, was you kind of struggle with sin, you have this struggle with it, and you're trying to beat it, and but just try not to do bad things. And then when you die, if you are saved in Christ, then you have this then you live in this perfect body, and and all the sin is washed away, and you're done, and everything's done. And so it just sort of felt like, okay, well then I just got to like tough it out until I die, and then it's done. But the concept of purgatory brings in this idea that, no, you're actually going to have to clean up your soul, whether you do it in this life or in the next. The work still needs to happen. And since you are you're going to live forever, you're going to have to do it. So if you get started now, it's just going to save some time in the afterlife when you have to do it. Now, I don't know if I could sit and defend it perfectly theologically, but I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the argument of
there being some place
that there is a holy work that still continues after your death.
Sure.
And that if I struggle with pride as a living person, that is something that needs to get taken care of eventually. And it doesn't just get taken care of with Jesus sort of waving a wand over you and you're no longer proud. You actually have to go through and do the work of cutting it out with the help of God, with the help of the Spirit, with sort of the tools. You are able to do it because of Christ, but you still have to do it,
Sure.
as opposed to it being sort of magically done for you. So that's the point of purgatory that I could be convinced of. If in the hereafter there was like, okay, all right, Donaldson, you still got all this work to do. You still have these sins that are still in your personality. You got to get rid of them, and to before you can sort of continue on in God's presence. That wouldn't surprise me. I'd be like, oh well, this does seem to be in character with how I understand what is asked of me in this life.
Sure.
That's
it provides an analog to how things are in on Earth. That, if I have a character flaw, if I have some kind of problem with me, I actually need to do something about that.
So, like, why should I work on my? Let's say I am a timorous person. Let's say I'm full of fear. Why should I work on my fear in this life if I'm just going to get a perfect personality, or I'm going to get some kind of magic waved over me? Then really all I got to do is grit my teeth and hang on and not have any major blow-ups in this life. And then in the end, I kind of get bailed out. But if you have some sort of conception of purgatory, or some sort of conception of that needing to work for the soul's benefit and improvement after death, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, I better get started. I mean, if you're going to get started, you might as well get started now.
No, sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
What do you think, Berg?
I'm currently, I ran and grabbed my
the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Okay.
Catechism and Vatican Council II off my shelf, and I'm currently
as every good Protestant should.
Are we Catholic? What's just happening, guys?
I took the class in college and I kept the books and
The Catholic class?
yeah,
I didn't take
intro to Catholicism.
Hey, for real?
Yeah,
I never took one of those. That's cool.
yeah.
Good for you, man.
One of my friends failed it.
Okay.
It was a great
Looks like he was
class.
Protestant.
I had a teacher named Karen Heller. Karen, if you're listening, I think you're great. I think English is her like 8th language.
Oh, wow.
She has 3 PhDs.
Wow.
Knew the Pope personally.
Cool.
And I can't tell you how many times I called her Helen Keller instead of Karen Heller.
Karen Heller.
And she had been proposed to 3 times and had turned them all down because none of them as good as Jesus. She was the best lady.
Wow.
Was she a nun, or was she in a religious vocation, I guess?
No, she was not in religious vocation. Okay. She worked at Whitworth College. Shout out Whitworth. Yeah. And she was just a great professor.
That's cool.
And anyway, I'm looking up currently the doctrine of purgatory. So, bros, if you want to question me as the expert in a few minutes, I'll be open for business.
All right.
No. Do you want to say, AJ, anything? I don't know what to.
About my feelings towards purgatory?
Yeah, sure. Just as we're diving into, like, we're talking about a thing that, as 3 Protestants, our churches at least would not say, "Hey, this is a thing that happens." But but does that make sense? But it's still the Purgatorio is an important part of Western canon. Just is there any reaction to us going into that?
So I think there is still discomfort for me because it places pressure on the notion that, and this is a thoroughly Protestant answer, but it places pressure on works-based salvation. Right? I am not worthy for heaven until I do something about it, right? Until I am purged of my actual sin. Well, that means that the purgation of my sin. Did I pronounce purgation? Is it purge?
I think it's a hard G.
Is it a hard
I
G?
think it is.
Purgation.
It's a nightmare to say that, isn't it?
Purgation? Purgation?
Yeah. No one reacted.
Purgation sounds
sorry.
like
okay.
Feels like saying boogers to me. Anyway, the purgation of my sin is reliant upon me rather than upon the sacrifice of Christ, and therefore I get a portion of the glory rather than the saving work of Christ.
Sure.
Right? So I am in heaven. If I'm in heaven, due only to his work and his complete mercy, then he receives all of the glory for that. If his mercy has gotten me most of the way, but hey, I still have some work to do. Like, I like the inclusion of the human person in that sort of work, but it seems to me to perhaps reduce God's glory a little bit. And these are like basic off the cuff thoughts. Sure. I haven't thought super thoroughly about it.
But isn't the only reason you can climb the mountain because of Christ's salvation offered to you? Like it's
like
that,
parents holding their children's arms up as they take their first steps, right?
Yeah, or that. Yeah, no, that's a fine analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would not. I think it would not shake my faith to find that there was a purgatory. I don't have any specific problems with it.
Oh man, we're getting fired.
Why?
Oh, I'm just kidding.
For being for your
And is that a
openness
statement?
to-
No, I don't think. Is there?
I don't think it's a thing that
it's not a-
personally have fully bought into yet, but it certainly wouldn't be the thing that would stop me from converting to Catholicism.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Makes sense?
This took a way different direction than I thought it would. Okay, so just keep that thought in mind of the works-based salvation, because this was AJ's response is how I felt going into this. Of like, I'm kind of reading this just because I need to, like, because I want to get to the Paradiso,
Right.
which is the good stuff. But like this Purgatorio is stuck in the middle, and I probably should read it first.
Well, Purgatorio is also like a guide of how to live now,
And that's
or at least that's what lots of people have sort of. Maybe that's sort of like a trying to get out of purgatory free card for Protestants, and they say, "Well, you should read Purgatory as a guide to how to live in the earthly existence."
Sure.
But that's sort of I remember reading it when I read it in college. That being the one of the ways to think about it, one of the frameworks to enter into it is like
totally. That's actually interesting. So AJ, you talked about this last time, and so correct me when I get this wrong. So hell is formed from Satan being kicked out of heaven, hitting the earth, making this big old dent in the earth, correct?
Yeah, when Satan fell from heaven, he fell like a meteor and went and carved basically. Yeah, it's the big crater left by Satan hitting the earth, and then he is lodged in the very center of the world, right? And from there he poisons all of the earth.
Sure. But then the land that's pushed out on the other side
Is the
Purgatory.
the Mount of Purgatory.
Yeah. So, and then at the end of Mount Purgatory, we actually go into like planets and stuff. Like that's where Paradiso takes place, is in the planet, because everything circles around the earth. So
It goes to the spheres, right?
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Yep. Nailed it. So,
/ heaven, the final frontier.
but I only bring that up as the point to say that Purgatory is the one of the three comedies that actually does take place on Earth. Again, it's like I'm not.
In earth, on earth, above earth. Is that kind of...
Yes, sorry. So like for hell being under earth, it is a different place than like on earth. Purgatorio takes place like we're not even on Mount Purgatory when we start the book. So in some sense, I think, Graham, what you're saying is significant, that this is the one book that takes place on earth.
Quote unquote.
And I'm putting air quotes, which I'm sure all of you can see, podcast listener, because obviously, you know, he's accompanied by a dead dude and they're seeing spirits on the way up. So like in that sense, it's not on earth, but does that make sense? That there's one that is clearly in a different place. There's one that actually, like when you read the descriptions, takes place on earth, and then the next one's in space, which Dante in space. Okay.
Speaking of which, oh man, Star Trek Picard's so bad.
Oh,
What?
did you go see it?
Oh, it's terrible.
Why do you go
the
see
TV show?
The new Star Trek?
I thought it was a movie.
Oh,
Is it a TV
no, it's
show?
a TV show.
Oh.
It's so bad.
It's bad?
There's poor people.
What? I'm sorry that you had to see.
No. In the show, remember in Star Trek they
In
like
Star
got
Trek,
rid of.
they've
I don't
defeated
know
They
anything.
defeated poverty,
I
but
don't know
now it's
anything
like
about this.
now it's like I worked in Starfleet and it chewed me out and spat me out, and now I'm poor. It's like what?
That's weird.
What world is this?
Yeah, it's universal income.
I turned it off.
I was just thinking I would actually totally watch the episode where Picard stumbles onto Purgatory and then has to figure out how to deal with the Prime Directive.
That should be
He's
great.
like, oh no. Or he's in the spheres and all of a sudden he sees like these saints organized like a giant flower and he's like, what in the world? And he has to
There was probably an episode.
like fight the Borg
think
off
so?
as they come and try to assimilate all the saints.
This would be good.
Or the Borg is... Guys, I'm writing it right now. The Borg assimilate the saints and they all become holy because the saints are integrated into their hive mind. Then the Borg is pushed toward virtue and they become the savior of the whole universe.
That has to be the twist at the end, because they have to think that they're going to like poison the saints, right?
Yeah, but the saints like reverse it and...
I regret talking about Star Trek.
Prohibiting its members from interfering with the internal and natural developments of alien civilization. It's just you can't interfere. That's the Prime Directive.
Yeah, so I wouldn't
Oh
be
my
able to
word,
come
what's
and...
happening?
Are we? Did we just become a Star Trek fan
It's all we've ever been.
fan podcast?
I'm okay with that.
If you want to talk about the Prime Directive, you can reach us at Classical Stuff.
This is weird. Okay, so the first point of that is that Purgatory, the book, does take place on Earth in some sense. So, Graham, your point I think is helpful. So even if you listener are listening to this and all that's in the back of your mind the whole time is Purgatory is not real, which is fine, just know that there is still value in this of there are spiritual lessons that are learned throughout it, and we won't actually get, again, we're not getting to the mountain itself today, but each of those levels is about overcoming sin, which is for the, you know, for the Christian listening, you're like, yeah, I want to overcome sin, but also who listening is like, you know what I love is being gluttonous, and like I'm ruled by my love for food. Like no one hears that and is like, that's the life I want to lead.
Are you sure?
I mean, I would hope so. If when you phrase it that way, I guess there are people who would say, I want to eat Chinese buffet every day, but I don't know. But you shouldn't.
Or some people who completely organize their thoughts and time and mind and habits and free time around the consumption of food.
Sure. That's fair. But maybe this is to point out that those are problems, that those aren't the way that we're supposed to be. And then there is like a way to overcome it, I guess, is the other way to take it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've kind of covered this, and I didn't expect to go into this. So this is Dr. Jason Baxter. This is him writing about purgatory, just for anyone listening. This idea of a man being saved through fire or having worthless works burned away. Sorry, I should read the Bible quote he has first. He quotes 1 Corinthians 3:12 through 15. Now, if any man build upon the foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss. But he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire.
My grandpa, whenever he talked about that verse, he said, "There's going to be people in heaven who smell like smoke."
I like that. That's funny.
Because some of the things they had,
class?
Yeah. No, because some of the things they had will burn, and they will be nothing, and they will have escaped as if by fire.
Sure. And that's this. Continuing with Dr. Baxter, this idea of a man being saved through fire or having worthless works burned away was universally read for the first 1,000 years of the church as referring to some sort of after-death cleansing experience. I will say, Dr. Baxter says this, does not back that up. Actually, he does. He goes through a few examples here of people who talk about, they don't call it purgatory because it hasn't been codified as so even to pull up the Catechism of the Catholic Church, like that's a later conglomeration of other views of purgatory. Anyway, he cites a number of examples of people talking that way. So I didn't expect us to start this way. I mean, this is like a widely held belief. This is taught by the Catholic Church. The Eastern Orthodox have a different version of this that I forget the name of, and there are more levels than Dante has, but there's some kind of like place you go for sins to be removed before heaven. So I guess we can take it that way. I would say the other part of diving into purgatory is that what we've been saying already. I'll just start reading some quotes here. There's one huge difference between this suffering. He's talking about the suffering in purgatory, but there's one huge difference between the suffering in purgatory and what might have been imposed on them in hell. Here in purgatory, these repentant souls suffer voluntarily. They give their wills to accepting their condition, and thus they possess hope, even joy, that this suffering is dynamic, transformative, and liberating. A thing that we haven't brought up and is probably important to know is that everyone who is in purgatory is and will eventually be in paradise. Mm-hmm. Purgatory is not a place you stay forever.
Which is why which goes back to what AJ was talking about with being the work of God or lesser God's glory. Like the fact that everybody who is in purgatory is going to make it to heaven anyway. The only reason that they're there and they can make it to heaven is because of Christ's atoning sacrifice. I guess that would be the argument to sort of marry those two things together.
But to say that there was an act required in life of some type of profession of faith.
Yes.
So there is an action on the other side. Mm-hmm. But I think Protestants would still say...
It doesn't get you to the top of the line or the front of the line. It just gets you to like the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah, which I guess we'll get into that once we're actually in the book itself. But there are some like...
Doesn't get you on Space Mountain, just gets you in the park.
Yeah. But it will eventually get you to Space Mountain.
Right.
But you...
What are you guys talking... I don't know what this is.
Disneyland.
Never been.
Oh, you'll get you...
I can't think of anything worse than amusement parks.
Especially right now with...
No, just in general.
Oh, okay. You don't like amusement? Okay, you're wrong. Okay. For Dante
and... Pretty sure it's like... What? Dante's Hell is an amusement park.
Do you think so? Because you're stuck there forever?
Nobody's written that book yet.
We could write that book. For Dante and the medieval tradition, the souls of purgatory are, of course, saved, forgiven their sins, but they are not yet ready to see God. Their ability to participate in the heavenly community is still limited by the vicious habits they did not devote themselves to reforming in life. And that's part of what's funny in reading this book, is that you still have lazy people in purgatory. And maybe it's similar to in hell, there are still angry people. Mm-hmm. It's different because... they'll always be angry. Is that what Dante is getting at in the Inferno? Like people don't move beyond their condition.
Yeah, and what's more, I don't think they necessarily want to, right? They are blinded to their condition, and everyone in purgatory realizes their condition, right? Doesn't it say somewhere that these are the group of people that rejoice while they burn, something like that?
Sounds right.
Because they have hope of someday seeing God.
That's the lustful at the top, or near the top.
Yeah, which again we'll get into next time. In this section, who says this. I don't have it written down. Do not dwell upon the nature of the suffering. Think about what will follow. Do not dwell upon the nature of the suffering. Think about what will follow. And then finally, just to repeat the same thing we've said 100 times. As Inferno is to tears and Paradiso is to dance, Purgatorio is to prayer. Prayer is the opposite of the tight grip of the souls in hell. It is the opening of the gates of the heart, an effort to allow God to come, cleanse, and dwell within. And so even if you listener are like, I don't want to hear about purgatory, these are helpful things to know just in life. Okay. Okay. We'll just dive into it. So Dante goes. So Divine Comedy starts out that Dante is hanging out in a forest and he's wandering around. You want to take the first part of this story?
You want me to summarize Inferno?
Just he's wandering around,
sees this mountain, wants to head up the mountain, and is blocked by a few beasts. Gets all scared, and then Virgil comes and saves him and says, "Hey, bro, this is not the way you get to go. You don't just get to go up the mountain. We have to go a different way." And then starts plunging all the way through hell. They descend through hell, basically going on a giant hell tour. Dante cries and passes out pretty often. Yep. And then eventually they meet Satan himself and crawl up his legs and then find a cavern that leads them to the other side of the earth and up to the mountain of Purgatory. And so at the end of the Inferno, they stand before the mountain staring at the stars. And
when they go down, is it on Good Friday?
Yes. And then they come out 3 days later, I believe.
So we open in Canto 1. It is Easter, so there's some imagery there of him having come out of his death and come into a new life, even though he's not yet in paradise.
That's
right?
Nice,
isn't that? But it's funny that the new life is purgation of sins.
Well, this was sort of the point, right?
Sure.
That the new life gets you to the bottom of the mountain,
and then you got to climb that mountain.
Yep.
You know? Yeah. Okay, so he is.
It's like when you go on a mountain hike and you've worked for 4 hours and you're like, oh man, you come to where you think you're just going to see over the whole valley, and then you look up and there's still 16,000 feet to go, and you're just like, oh, bother.
It's like when you're grading papers and you think you graded the last one, and then you remember you had a whole other section you forgot on your desk. Or
the ones all coming in from study hall because 8 kids were sick and they're all coming in from study hall. Oh, I hate that feeling.
Yeah, I got a lot of examples of this. Okay, I'm worried about y'all. Okay.
Our life is purgation.
That's what it sounds like. I guess that is kind of the point.
Disappointment.
I feel like that's like a healthy expectation for life. Isn't that better to expect that than to expect I'm going to be blissed out every moment of every day?
Mm-hmm,
I don't know. I think there's something healthy in this.
That's why we're so jolly.
Is that? I don't know. Anyway, one day I'll be jolly. I'll get there. I have to climb purgatory though. Okay.
You got to be a teacher. You got to teach more classes. That's
I know. I only teach one. I teach a leadership class, and anyway.
If constant disappointment is the requirement, I could help with that.
You're not. Like. This is a bummer. Wait, hold on. I don't want that. Okay. So, Dante climbs out of the Inferno, climbs out of hell, and makes it to kind of the shores of Purgatory. This through most of the book, there's like a repetition to what we've seen in the Inferno before. So in the same way that there was a kind of a vestibule, like an area that there's a vestibule on the other side of the water. There's like a place you show up when you first get to hell.
Right.
And then...
Like a lobby.
Yeah. And then you get then there's the body of water that Karen drives you down. Isn't that how you say it? Anyway.
I know.
It is. It's totally how you pronounce it.
You're imagining a different Karen.
But I'm imagining soccer mom.
The Reddit Karen.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. As opposed to here in Purgatory, what? You're imagining that Karen also.
Sit down.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably more what it's like in the Inferno, right? Is the Inferno? Yeah, hell is just soccer drop-offs. Is that? Yeah, that sounds about right. Y'all are hilarious. Okay, this is good. Okay, so he shows up in Purgatory, and instead of it being a scary monster carting him across, he's carted across by an angel. If I'm not mistaken, it's an angel who doesn't there's no need for an oar or anything. Like the angel is complete in itself, and so the boat moves kind of on its own. And the entire time is spent them, I think they're singing on the way in, but they're all singing in unison. So there's no I don't know, Inferno kind of has this cacophony and everyone's doing their own thing. And you start to see in Purgatory this movement toward unity. And you even see that as they are crossing the water. As they cross, they meet the person who welcomes you to Purgatory. I don't know what the right word for that is. And the person is Cato. This is Cato the Younger. Mm-hmm. Graham, you brought him up a second ago. Do you know anything about this fellow?
Is he the Cato who killed himself because of Caesar?
Yes.
That Cato?
Yes.
That's Cato the Younger? So when the Republic was falling and Caesar was crossing the Rubicon and was going to sort of take over, Cato, who was against Caesar and was sort of against the idea of a king, which is what he saw Caesar was trying to be in general, when he realized that kind of the Republic was over and all hope was lost and all of the people were like, yeah, we want a king. We don't want this Republican government anymore. He committed suicide, killed himself sort of stoically and nobly, or at least that's how the classical reading of it is, that he's this sort of this noble holdout to the way that Rome should have been in the face of sort of populist tyranny.
You've said it all. So a morally upstanding dude. He would not accept bribes. He stood up to Caesar ultimately. In lieu of him being killed by Caesar, he killed himself. Is the short of it. He would have died either way. Instead, he committed suicide.
I forgot about the wouldn't take bribes thing.
Yeah, it's a thing repeated often about him. Does anyone notice any problems with this character being the introduction to Purgatory?
He was pre-Christ.
Pre-Christ. What else?
He killed himself.
Okay. What is it about the pre-Christ thing that is problematic, AJ?
He could not have been a believer. He was therefore necessarily pagan. And as far as I know, they all live in limbo. The virtuous pagans go to limbo, which is in hell. They're not specifically tortured. They're just they just don't ever have hope of seeing God.
Yeah. And just from trying to look into this, because it seems insane that it's like 2 pages in and this has already been thrown out there. Like, where's Dante going with this? It is a debated thing as to why Cato is in Purgatory, because in one sense, as a guardsman, he's not moving up the chain. Does that
he's stuck?
He is stuck where he is.
Maybe he's like an ambassador. He doesn't live in hell, but he's like still a citizen of hell.
Sure.
Maybe it's that kind of thing.
Totally possible.
He's on like a work release.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, and so I think Dr. Baxter says this somewhere that essentially he will eventually be in paradise, but like at the end times, but he'll be stuck in Purgatory for way longer than anyone else who's just going through Purgatory.
Oh, he makes it?
Yes, because he's in Purgatory, that would eventually be wrapped up into heaven. And I guess that can be controversial also. But just to say, so it's not like it's better than being stuck in limbo. I guess he's kind of by himself, which is a bummer. But the people in limbo will stay in limbo. Or is limbo the right? Is that what he calls it? Is limbo? So they'll stay there forever. Okay, yeah. So this is a better spot than that. Never mind, I take it back. Okay, but this is, you all have already said this. This is again quoting from A Beginner's Guide to Dante's Divine Comedy. And so, although admired, this is Cato. Cato was admired as a man of action and discipline. The pagan hero had a triple handicap. He was not a Christian. He was a suicide, and he was an opponent of the empire. He's bringing this point in because at the very bottom of hell, the people who are punished are those who betray their lords. I mean, it's Brutus and Judas and Cassius. So two of the
people who assassinated Caesar,
which Cato would have done if he could have. He didn't actually raise arms against Caesar in the. I'll quote something later.
So there was no betrayal.
Yes, but there kind of was because he didn't believe in the empire, which Dante was a fan of. Dante would have wanted the Holy Roman Empire to last forever. Okay, so he's got 3 problems going for him. So what is he doing here, not just in the Christian afterlife, but elevated to such a prestigious role of governance? Why do we not, at the very best, find him in limbo? Virgil's speech to Cato might give us a clue. May his advent be a delight to you. I believe this is Virgil talking about Dante. So Dante's advent. May Dante's advent be a delight to you. He seeks freedom, which is so precious, as the one who forfeit his own life for it well knows. You know this. To you, even death in Utica did not seem better. There you left that garment that will be gloriously bright on the great day. The passage alludes to Cato's suicide in Utica in modern-day Tunisia. Before Cato took his life, though, he ensured that his followers were safe. But the way the ancient Roman Lucan describes Cato's death must have captivated the Christian Dante. Lucan says that Cato hoped his blood would redeem all the nations, and his death would pay the whole penalty incurred by Rome. And then he goes on from there. I don't know if there's much of a comment to make after that. That clearly Cato thinks he is doing something more than just killing himself, which would be what would put him in hell if he had done that.
Yeah, he wasn't so part of the sin of the Wood of Suicides is despair.
Yeah.
And his was not despair, right?
Nope.
His suicide was done in hope.
Yeah.
And he wasn't casting off his garment as a refusal of it, right? He, if given the choice, he would have kept it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes. Esalen quotes the same passage I just read. Let my blood redeem the nations. This is from the Pharsalia, book 2, if anyone wants to go check that out. Okay, so that's some of the explanation for why Cato is that first person there. It also, this will be the first of many that I'm sure we won't get to today, just of many moments where Dante is not as simplistic as I think he is, because I've only read one of his works. So going into this, I would have expected, oh no, suicide very clearly goes into hell off the bat. Now, that's not to say suicide's not a bad thing or that you shouldn't commit suicide, but just to say that he sees nuance here and that there are different reasons for these actions.
Yeah.
So when we, I'm sure Dante wouldn't have phrased it this way, but when we in 2020 say that, it's the heart that matters, it's the intention that matters, there's still a category for that in Dante's work, right? It matters that the reason that Cato was caring for his people, that it was an act of rebellion against a corrupt empire that he was acting. And I don't know, I think that matters.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good.
Okay. Then they cross the water, which gets them, they're still, they haven't made it to the mountain yet. They are still climbing up on the way up there.
Wait, before we move on, what's Cato's job?
Oh, he just stands at the front and greets people. So he,
it's like an usher.
He is an usher. He calls out Dante and asks why this dirty looking dude is here.
Just like Karen does.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Because Dante's not dead. Because Dante hasn't died.
Yeah, that's why Karen freaks out. He's like, you're not supposed to go this way. Or was it Phlegyas that says that? I forget. One of the guys gets, I think it's, so Karen doesn't like him because he's not dead and he's not supposed to be there. And then Phlegyas is actually, I think he tries to catch him. He's like, I got you, you sinner. And then he realizes that he just has to be an errand boy.
Yeah.
And gets all grumpy.
Which Cato is not. Cato's grumpy at the beginning, kind of. Dante shows up.
Cato was notoriously grumpy.
Yes, not a humorous fellow. He's just wondering why someone's coming out of, he sees them come out of the pit of hell. Who was your guide? What lamp has led your feet, escaping from the sea of that deep night, forever blackening the infernal pit? Are the abyss's laws so broken, or has heaven changed and set a new decree that you, the damned, come to my rocky shore? So he's not very happy about them. But then Virgil gives, I just read a section of it, but Virgil gives a defense of why they're there. Cato basically relents. He the appeal over and over again for why they're there is because Beatrice said so. That's really what it comes down to over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so then Cato talks about, I was assuming wife, I should have checked this, but Marcia, in my life, my Marcia did so please my eyes that any favor she desired I granted to her. But now she lies dwelling beyond the evil river, so she must be in hell. By the law established when I left the world, she can no longer move me now nor ever. So he did have a care for her. I don't know, but those cares have changed now that he's in the afterlife. He also did not seem like a very warm, fuzzy person to begin with. So there is also that. Okay, but Cato is on board for them being in purgatory again because Beatrice told them to, and Beatrice is up in paradise, so they need to go and chase after her. All right, so that gets us into Canto 2. Canto 2 is where they are traveling along the water. That's what is going to get them closer to the mountain itself. I don't think this is... I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this one because it's not super interesting. Cato gets to be grumpy at one point because they have a side conversation, and Cato's like, cut it out. You're here to get to heaven. You're not here to talk. So there's this
That's how I start every class of mine as well.
Good for you. And this starts off a trope throughout all 9 of these books where, I don't know the details and maybe it's in the catechism, that essentially all of their time in purgatory is reduced whenever someone who's living prays for them. So every page, someone's like, hey, Dante, would you please just pray for me right now? And it doesn't say he does it, so he might be a jerk. So anyway.
He does the Protestant thing where he's like, I'll totally pray for you. And,
and then just like walks away. Yeah, totally.
Do you guys want to hear the bit about purgatory? It's really short. It's only
sure.
like half a page or so.
Yeah.
All right, let me pull it up here. Continue on until I can find it.
Okay. But they are traveling along in the water. They get rebuked by Cato. They then start singing a song together, and Cato is okay with them singing, but not with them having idle conversation. What carelessness down here. Hurry to scrape down the scales that keep the Lord from being manifest to you. And I think that is also helpful as an image to why this purgation is happening. It's to remove barriers between the repentant and God. That gets us to the end of Canto 2. Do you want to say anything?
You got it there, Bert?
Yeah, I've got it. So this is all I could find in either this or Vatican II. I'm sure there are more documents in the Catholic Church about the full doctrine of purgatory, but here's what it says in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The final purification, or purgatory. All who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation. But after death, they undergo purification, so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven. The Church gives the name purgatory to this final purification of the elect, which is entirely different from the punishment of the damned. The Church formulated her doctrine of faith on purgatory, especially at the councils of Florence and Trent. The tradition of the Church, by reference to certain texts of Scripture, speaks of a cleansing fire. And here is a quote. As for certain lesser faults, we must believe that before the final judgment there is a purifying fire. He who is truth says that whoever utters blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will be pardoned neither in this age nor in the age to come. From this sentence, we understand that certain offenses can be forgiven in this age, but certain others in the age to come. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. This teaching is also based on the practice of prayer for the dead, already mentioned in sacred scripture. And then there's another quote, and this is from Maccabees. Therefore, Judas Maccabeus made atonement for the dead, that they might be delivered from their sin. And so he is making atonement from the dead to deliver the dead from their sin, which is something, I think that the Protestant Church doesn't sort of read or follow Maccabees. We don't include that in our canon. It might change our view on that particular piece of scripture. And then it says, from the beginning, the Church has honored the memory of the dead and offered prayers in suffrage for them. Above all, the Eucharistic sacrifice, so that, thus purified, they may attain the beatific vision of God. The Church also commends almsgiving, indulgences, and works of penance undertaken on behalf of the dead. Quote, let us help and commemorate them. If Job's sons were purified by their father's sacrifice, why would we doubt that our offerings for the dead bring them some consolation? Let us not hesitate to help those who have died and to offer our prayers for them. And that is it. It moves on to hell after that.
And as three Protestants, we have zero qualms or questions about any of the... Oh, never mind. Okay.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah.
I think the first
conversation.
That's helpful.
Yeah, the first passage could be thought of a few different ways, and we don't include the Maccabees in our canon, and so there's a few different ways to think about that. But that, in brief, is the Catholic doctrine of purgatory.
That's fair. And Anglicans, you can include apocryphal readings from the Apocrypha in the weekly reading.
Of course you can.
Of course we can. So anyway, the middle way, man. Come on, we've got this figured out. Yeah. You'll make a great Anglican.
I grew up Anglican.
Move out to the land.
No, they're so obtuse.
You grew up Episcopalian, didn't you?
No.
Joke on
Anglican. We don't have Episcopalians.
You don't have the distinction? Never mind. Okay. So we're we're getting close to the end of our time, so I'll breeze through kind of what these categories are. Again, we haven't actually made it to purgation. This is like, I don't know. I guess there is still a work that's happening here to get people to that mountain, but we haven't gotten to the 7 levels that like we would expect from the Inferno, like the big 7 to take down. These are separate categories, and again, they are what kind of like just surprised me as being a part of the Purgatorio, and we'll see if you all feel the same. Canto 3. Included in Canto 3 are those who died while excommunicated from the church. Does this blow anyone else's mind? This doesn't blow anyone else's mind?
So they're excommunicated, but
they're in purgatory.
And they're in purgatory.
They're going to heaven.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
Still believers.
Yeah, but like, as someone as Dante, who has a high view of, again, empire and the Catholic Church, for there to be a distinction between those excommunicated and those who are saved, this blew my mind.
The church could be wrong.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
mistake.
I don't think Dante has a he has a high view of the church as a lady in a concept, but not necessarily in practice.
Church,
there are
sure.
quite a few popes
who are in hell, right?
Hell.
Isn't that Sure.
So I don't think he believes the Catholic Church to be infallible.
Yeah, sure. And is there a category in the Inferno for people who are excommunicated, or is it different sins?
No, it's different sins. So simony would be marting of church office or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there are different things that can get you into trouble that if you do them while to the church or while in the church, can be damaging. But
still, anyway, this blew my mind. But okay, y'all are more reasonable than me. So this is at the very end of that section. No man so loses by their curses power eternal love that love cannot return so long as hope shows any green and flower. Isn't that a nice image?
Oh.
No man so loses by their curses power eternal love that love cannot return as long as hope shows any green and flower. So as long as this is what you all are saying, as long as there is any I guess like possibility of that salvation, that is what is sufficient to get them into purgatory instead of into hell. Which then, I think raises a lot of questions for me of like, again, the episode we did a year ago, we talked about like there are a ton of people in the Inferno. I don't know. It seems like they shouldn't be, right? I don't know. This is a larger conversation for another day. Okay. Canto number 4, we meet people who are late repenters. So they
you just say people who are late to parties.
Also that, but oh my gosh, this is where you would go. Is that?
Oh,
sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So they are. It's translated here as the negligent, but they are negligent to repent before they lost the capability to sin. Basically, these are people who, like in the last moments of their life, turn their life over to God.
It's like Constantine.
Constantine, yeah.
So deathbed repenters.
Deathbed repenters. That's a great way of putting it. So there, I think it is helpful that there is a category in here for that. That still counts. Like you're still making it to paradise one day, but also you're moved further down the chain because you should have been doing this work all your life.
A lot of work to do. You got a lot to catch up on.
Which I think is an instinct. I don't know. Wouldn't we share that instinct that there's a difference in a repentance that comes on the deathbed versus one that comes earlier in life? Okay. The next category is similar to those who are negligent and repent late in life. It's those who died by they're late repenters, but they die by violence. So the last category, it was like you die of old age, but in old age you repent at the very end. These are those who are murdered, basically, for most of them. They're murdered, and they, in their like last alive moments, they repent.
So battle stretcher repenters.
That's some. There's a woman who's murdered by her husband, but yes, that's also included in here. And I'll see. I think this is the one where there's a dude who gets shot with an arrow. I won't find it here. Oh, here it is. So this was, again, the baggage I bring into this is what we talked about at the beginning of like a works righteousness. Like that's the thing that gets you into heaven. And this is one of those examples that stuck with me and I found powerful. So this is one of the dudes who is here because they got killed and repented at the very last moment. Oh, he replied, below the Casentino rushes a stream, the Arciano, born in the Apennines above the Hermitage. Why did I include that part? That makes no sense. Just where it empties and its name turns vain, I arrived with an arrow in the throat, fleeing afoot and spattering the plain. And there at once my sight and speech was gone. I ended with Maria on my lips, and fell and left my flesh to lie alone. Its truth I tell it all alive. God's angel took me, and the one from hell hollered, oh, you from heaven, why deprive me of his soul? He shed one little tear, and you bear his immortal part away. I've got a different plan for this part here. You understand how watery mists arise and gather in the cooling atmosphere till condensation makes it rain again. To that ill will that ever seeks the wrong, he joined his intellect and stirred the smoke and wind by natural powers that make him strong. It keeps going on from there. So what is it that gets this dude into purgatory? I ended with Maria on my lips. This is one moment of repentance, and fell, left my flesh to lie alone. And then like literally one of the like bad angels comes up and is like, no, that one's mine. Like one final moment of repentance is enough to get a person into purgatory instead of Inferno. Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, he was probably baptized when he was a kid too, which also is supposed to have a bearing on that.
Which we brought up a year ago for Paolo and whatever.
Francesca.
Yeah. That we asked whether they were baptized or not. It's not clarified there, and he hasn't brought up baptism yet in these first 9 books, which is interesting because I would expect that to be a bigger deal of whether they were baptized or not. But again, what Dante points to is that moment of faith in his last moments of life as what gets him there.
Well, I would assume that most of the people during this time were baptized as infants, right? Yes. And so maybe if you took that as their criteria, then everybody would be in purgatory or heaven, right?
Totally. But this is the... I should read more on Dante to see his view on the sacraments, because it would be reasonable to expect him to have a high view of sacrament where, I don't know, if he would say original sin is taken away in that moment, shouldn't they then be set to go for purgatory?
Maybe the argument is that in his final moment, when he, sort of had this cry out to God, it has to have come from some place of belief in God's supremacy and power and ability to save.
Yes.
Whereas if you didn't think that, in your final moments when you get shot in the throat with an arrow and your last moment is like, crap, or
right.
or like, I hate that guy, or I wish I could have my dinner that I planned or whatever.
Right.
Then, it's belying that your habits are so far from, or that you just have absolutely no belief that God is God or in any way. I don't know. I don't know if that's satisfying. Maybe that's what he's getting at, is that in the last instance, the ember of belief in God is still burning a little bit.
And brought out by that moment.
Completely out and has sort of been fanned by that moment.
Sure. And maybe helpful is that what follows is Canto 6, where maybe in the same, Dante meets a spirit or a person, I don't know what they are at this point, and they end up talking about politics, but Dante in Purgatory is able to see the failings of his country. Is that like he's no longer tied to the same patriotism that he was tied to, I think, more in the Inferno, and even more so in life. He was a politician who was kicked out of the city. So this is what you're getting at, is like there are new things that are important to him as he is traveling up the mountain of Purgatory, or as he's approaching it. He's not actually.
That's like you, Thomas. You've given up video games and you chastise Hannenberg.
I do chastise you all.
And chastise us for our wasted time.
I mean, I very rarely say that, but I'm glad you feel my judgment.
You have gone into a higher plane.
Is that how that works? Wow.
Am I in paradise? Cut out the fat of
Is that
life.
what that is, man? Well, in this, and maybe following with that strange image, is that Dante goes down into the Inferno on Good Friday, comes out in Easter, and there's something helpful to that, to think about, in that his wanderings in the dark forest, that would be Lent, is when he's traveling around in that forest, which is the time that we're in right now. So there is something to doing that work ahead of time and then facing all of his problems through the Inferno, that he's then ready to deal with his sin on the other side of Easter. That I think is not just for Dante, that I think it's for us also. And I think of Lent as a time to cut out that fat, to get to the bone of life or whatever, suck out the marrow, what's the dumb quote?
Carpe diem, maybe.
Carpe diem, man. But I think that's what Dante is ultimately about, is like, what is it actually to live a full human life? It's not anyway. Yeah. Okay. So in my last 2 minutes before, I'll just breeze through these to say what happens in them. There is another group of late repenters. There are those who are preoccupied with cares of state. So you have all these like kings and like high up officials who
just neglected their soul because they were so busy.
Totally, 100%. And so they stand around in a valley, and I think
spent too much time like on Politico.
So me with my my political podcast will get me there. That's terrifying.
You got to
fight that
at the end.
That's fair. Yep. That's all it takes. I forget if it's this canto or the next one, but essentially these like high up people who thought they were really important now have to sing psalms together. And at night, this like giant snake comes in and like threatens to attack them, but they depend on I think it's 2 angels coming down every night to like save them from the snake.
So they have to be subordinate.
They have to be subordinate to a heavenly power to come in and fight for them instead of them fighting for their own interests.
Interesting.
So they just like sit around and they're terrified the entire night. and that is their purgatory.
But isn't it purgatory? Once you're done that, then you go to the next level, and once you're done that, you go to the next level.
Which I don't know about the late repenters. I don't know about these categories because
purgatory is the RPG of Dante.
Exactly.
You
you have your starting zone.
You level up, and then eventually you get into the end game, which is the spheres, right?
Yeah,
so you level up there too, but it's definitely a leveling situation.
Different system. Yeah. But that's so all of this will eventually get them to like the actual mountain. I'm not clear on whether they go through each of these levels because not all of them were late repenters who were heads of state. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if it's better. Is it better to like multi-class purgatory, or should you?
I don't like this at all. Oh no, they're
cast on crit.
They're different weightings. So this at the very end, he meets some people who are like lazy and just like they have repented and they're in purgatory and they just don't want to go any further, so they're just like stuck there.
Oh no.
But they're stuck there. I think it's that group that's stuck there for 3 times as long as they were lazy in life. That's how long they have to be in purgatory.
Oh,
but for the other categories, it's like 1 to 1. So for however long you were a ruler who neglected your people, you're there for a day, a year, whatever, in that section. So there is still like a hierarchy of like what's worse and what's better. And again, that gets us to the mountain itself. I don't know how the weighing system will work there.
Now, just with that snake thing, so that's how purgatory works, is that you have some kind of punishment or some kind of trial that you go through that is supposed to mirror poetically or teach you something about what you didn't learn while you were alive.
Yeah, it's very Grecian, like Sisyphean, right? Yeah. So his punishment has to do with the thing that he did. Well, Sisyphus doesn't so much. Who's the guy? Tantalus.
Tantalus. That's right.
So Tantalus is the guy that's tempted because he tried to trick the gods with food, and so they'd mess.
But Tantalus is stuck forever doing that.
Yeah.
Whereas these people have to, once they learn the lesson, it's like, all right, now you know that status is removed, and you can go on the next level.
Sure.
Yeah. This is good. This is actually a video game, but
it really is. It's pretty great.
But yeah, that gets us to the mountain, which we will talk about more next time. But I guess what's the point of splitting it into sections is to say that there is more complication to Dante than I expected going into it, that there's more nuance to all of this, and that, whether I'm reading this more from the angle of what do we do in life as opposed to what does this say about the afterlife. We said this is for the Inferno. We're not saying this is like Dante's expectation of what purgatory is actually like. That doesn't mean we can't learn things from it. So that is that.
Cool. So I'm excited. I want to climb this mountain. Let's do it.
Next time we'll get to it.
Well,
we did. So yeah, it was Mount Parnassus a couple weeks ago, and now it's Mount Purgatory. It was really love hiking. Yeah,
climber.
Yeah.
Well, this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know with Graham, AJ, and Thomas. And if you have questions, comments, feedback, things you want clarification on, you can email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. If you want access to all of the back episodes, because there's only 100 on iTunes and on other platforms, you can go to classicalstuff.net and you can just individually see all the episodes there. If you want to tweet at us in your isolated social seclusion, you can tweet at us at Classical Stuff, CLSSCAL Stuff on the Twitters. And besides that, that's all we got.
Cool. Rock and roll.
Well, thank you, Thomas.
Thanks.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, next time.
Ciao.
Ciao.